next generation ServiceNow connector, which I know is why a lot of you are here, and I'm excited to dive into that. But before I hand it off to Pete, I'm going to spend a minute talking to you about our historical integration with ServiceNow. So for those of you who are not already aware, Apptio offers two Data Link Classic connectors that pull data automatically from ServiceNow into Apptio. And you can see those two listed right here. We have our ServiceNow connector and our ServiceNow REST connector. And like I said, those are available today through Data Link Classic. And the main difference between the REST connector and the ServiceNow connector is that the REST connector is a little bit more malleable. It exports using a REST URL. It is more performant and it's preferable for larger files. But with that said, there's also a little bit more uptime or more time up front to get that started. So the ServiceNow connector, once you type in your credentials, it'll populate either the reports or the tables that you have available to you to pull in, and then the ServiceNow REST connector, you'll be able to type in any REST URL of any report or table that you want to pull in to Apptio. And there are some limitations with those connectors, as you can see here, but the beauty of it is we do have a lot of resources at your disposal to help you as you're mapping your ServiceNow data into your Apptio master data sets. And those resources can be found hyperlinked here. So as we post the PowerPoint for you to view afterwards, I recommend that you click into here and it'll prescriptively guide you on how to set up these connectors, but then also what columns map and correspond to every ServiceNow column coming out of your CMDB and how you should map that into our Apptio master data sets. So setting the stage, this is what we have historically, and this is the integration that we have historically with ServiceNow. But now moving forward, we do have a next generation ServiceNow connector in progress, and that's what we're going to spend the majority of our conversation today talking about. So I'm going to pass it along to Pete, who will be taking us from here. So Pete, if you want to introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Thanks, Emily, for the opening. So to the rest of the people on the call, it's Pete Wilson here. I run the APAC customer success team for Apptio. And for the last better part of 9 months, I've been working on a next generation integration protocol between ServiceNow and Apptio. A little bit of background about myself. I've been with Apptio just over 3 years now. But before that, I was actually a customer of Apptio and ServiceNow. And I was in senior IT executive roles, CIO and CTO type roles, for the past 15 plus years. So I come from the other side of the fence, so to speak, where a lot of obviously our customers on the call today are. And I understand firsthand the challenges when it comes to getting data in and out of systems like Apptio. And really where this started was, as Emily's pointed out on the screen here, we've had connections with ServiceNow running for many, many years. And many on the call will already be using these connectors and have been doing so for many years. But the challenges that we've heard over time is that the connectors were often a little difficult to work out in terms of how to use them, what to connect, what data. But most importantly, they weren't necessarily getting access to all of the latest data that ServiceNow is now offering, especially as part of their new Paris release with things like, for example, the Common Services Data Model, and for things like their auto-discovery data that's coming in. So that's really where we've been spending a lot of time in conjunction with ServiceNow. This is a joint partnership. We've been joined at the hip on this for well over 6 to 9 months, as I said earlier. And over the course of this quarter, so for international time zones, that's January through to March, you will see both an ingress connector, which is data coming from ServiceNow into Apptio, and an egress connector for the first time, which is data going from Apptio back to ServiceNow. And that's one of the really exciting additions that I'll talk more about shortly. So let's talk a little bit about the scene setting as to why we've headed down this path. And many of you will be very familiar with this story. So what we've got on here is pretty much our standard Atom taxonomy in our typical layers, going from the financial pools up to the towers view, into the services and application view, and then up to the business units view. And the color coding here is to really represent the data challenges that we see consistently across all of our clients when it comes to data. And that is that getting our financial data, very easy, very robust, a lot of integrity, connecting into the general ledgers, populating those cost pools, not really an issue. We move into the towers level, and that's where the challenges begin. And the common thing we hear from customers is, well, I don't really have good ServiceNow data, or I don't have a CMDB, or I don't have good storage, or I don't have good network, etc. And when you start to lose the integrity of that data quality at the towers level, that has a domino effect to when it comes to application and services. Because without good data, as many of you know at the towers level, we start to move into an assumptive allocation logic when it comes to application TCO. And then obviously that flows through an assumptive logic into services TCO. And the more assumptive the model, the less integrity that your end users often will come back to you with that says, well, I don't understand why this application is saying X dollars when I know for a fact it should be Y. And in many cases, as many of you would know, it's because of those assumptive allocations. So the better data we get below the model, the less assumptive, and we move to the consumptive-based model. And it's the consumptive-based model that we're really driving this towards. Because the more consumption-based, the more accurate, the more integrity, the more trust in the numbers as you flow up the model. So as we move into application TCO on a consumption-based, we can move into services TCO on a consumption-based, and then you can move into the showback and the chargeback at the business unit level on a consumption base. And that's really the core crux of part of this integration. I'm happy to take any questions. You can pop them into the chat window. Emily will monitor that for me, but please interrupt me if you've got any questions. Before I go on to the next slide, just as a positioning, any questions or comments from the audience on this opening slide? Okay.
Yeah, nothing coming in through the chat.
So now let's flip to the ServiceNow side of the world. So on the ServiceNow side of the world, they have similar challenges, just like Apptio, just like every software has, and their challenges are around the CMDB. And it's the maintenance of the CMDB, it's the resources to build and maintain the CMDB. There's often competing priorities, things more important than keeping that CMDB up to date. And there's very much a complacency view across many clients with the ServiceNow platforms that, the CMDB will get to it when we get to it, and it's not driving exactly what we need right now. There are more competing priorities. The resourcing and the maintenance is just too hard. Keeping a CMDB up to date manually is very, very difficult, as I'm sure many of you know. ServiceNow a number of years back went into the auto discovery space. And they've basically now brought to the table a very complex and smart set of auto discovery tools. Many clients have access to this as part of their licensing. Some clients may not, and you may need to talk to your ServiceNow account manager. But why is this important? Because what it does is it automatically polls your network 24/7, or however you've set it up, and it's looking constantly for any asset that has an IP address. Servers, storage devices, laptops, desktops, printers, multifunction devices, network devices, firewalls, etc. And what you can see here is that this is a visualization of what the auto discovery tool does. And it maps the application and all of the assets that are calling that application. So on the screen here, I've got a simple example at the top, that cog in the center of the screen. That's the SAP platform. On the left-hand side, you've got an SAP instance. In the middle, you've got an SAP instance. In this case, it's the production instance on the left. It's the test instance on the right. And underneath it, all of the Windows servers, the load balancers, the databases, the network equipment, the storage devices that are being referenced by that application. And as you can see, test and production sharing certain equipment. So trying to keep all of those links up to date, very, very difficult. Auto discovery in ServiceNow will do that for you. And it will populate that information into what we call an assets and application relationship table. And that's one of the new areas of the auto discovery that we're leaning on, because not only does it give us the relationship, but as you see at the bottom of the screen, it also tells you things like the rack that the server's living in, the data center zone, the computer room, and the actual data center. So this equipment is sitting in a New York data center on floor 1 in data center zone NY1A, and it's sitting in rack NY0101. So that information, not from an Apptio perspective, but from a ServiceNow or from an IT executive's perspective, to know exactly what equipment is where and being used by what is what we're after from an Apptio point of view. Because as you can see here, this is a consumptive-based view. It's telling us exactly what assets are being consumed by what applications. If you take this one step further, which we're not going to cover today, and you bring utilization software into the mixture, so SolarWinds, for example, or any of your utilization VMware tools that you have, not only will it tell you the application and asset relationship, but then you also get the percentage. So the production system consumes 70%, the test system consumes 30%. And that takes your consumptive-based allocation logic to the highest level possible. So with that in mind, the reason we are bringing these two platforms together on the next generation is because Apptio is our best-in-class financial transparency. From a ServiceNow point of view, they are the best-in-class for operational processes. From the Apptio's point, we have that ability to understand, manage, communicate, and recover costs. That's what we do. From the ServiceNow side, they automate the mapping of those infrastructure relationships, the CDD, the common services data models that we've talked about, and that is their specialty. We provide that best-in-class cost model. ServiceNow provides that best-in-class workflow and mapping engine. When we bring those two data sets closely together, we accelerate decision-making, giving faster transformations. We accelerate outcomes, giving faster time to value. And that's really the crux of this conversation. ServiceNow gives customers a great operational view, but they're weak on the financial view. Apptio brings a great financial view, but we don't really have that operational view. When you bring those two frameworks together and we give you an operational lens with integrity, and we give you a financial lens with integrity, we're giving you the best in both classes and giving you that best decisioning framework that we believe will allow those faster transformations and, most importantly, faster time to value. The way we're doing that on the next generation is really encapsulated in this page here. It's on the right-hand side. You'll see your customer network through your firewalls, the ServiceNow discovery tools, discovering 24/7, all of that information that we've talked about, populating that into the ServiceNow tables, asset tables, the application tables, the CMDB, and the common services data model. And it's from there that we're taking that rich set of operational data. So as you can see at the bottom, traditional server, storage, network, data center inventory, things that we've been taking for years. But at the top, we're doing a more enhanced view now, application inventory, application to asset relationships, business services and their relationships, and the business services subscriptions, all coming from not just the CMDB, but also the common services data model. Bringing that into Apptio, we significantly strengthen that IT towers level. We bring that data in so that it's accurate, it has that integrity. That allows us to flow up to the application and services, and obviously to the business units. And then finally, our egress connectors that'll be launching March, April, May of this year allow us to take summary information from Apptio back into ServiceNow. So our summary TCO of infrastructure and application and services, things like costings per ticket, subscription rates for the service catalogs, and service unit rates for the service catalogs, will all be able to be transferred automatically back into ServiceNow. What does that do for us? Those red boxes that we talked about previously, they go green. And most importantly, they go green because they're being updated on a regular basis automatically. No longer are you waiting for the manual CMDB push or the manual CMDB refresh. The auto discovery tools refresh it. Apptio picks it up as part of whatever its iteration is. And as you see on the left-hand side, our data quality, TCO, services, and consumptive all go through in terms of quality improvements. The insights, so many of you will be using our insights product. The greater the data quality, the greater the insights. The greater the defensibility you have in the Apptio model. The greater the trust your end users will have in the Apptio model and the Apptio numbers. And then most importantly, that customer satisfaction all seem to be increased. And then most importantly, the time to configure is down, the time to deploy is down, and the assumptive TCO is down. And those numbers are down because these new connectors are working out all of the file and field structure information for you. No longer will you have to work out the what and the where and where to put it. Connect it, we will pull it, and then we will bring it into the Apptio models for you. So I might just pause there. Any questions from the field? Emily, anything in the chat window?
Nothing in the chat, but if anyone wants to come off mute, feel free.
And then this is a view of what ServiceNow will be looking like. So for those of you that are familiar with the ServiceNow Owner's Workspace screen, they have a screen in there which talks about what is the estimated spend. Well, the changes that we're working on with ServiceNow is that estimated spend will now be an actual spend. And it'll be an actual spend because it's coming from our actual application TCO that we'll be sending across to ServiceNow. ServiceNow is also working on a number of enhancements to allow us to then show the breakdown at a high level of that spend. So if you're the HR services platform application owner, you can see all of your ServiceNow metrics in here in terms of your outage information, your performance scores, your customer satisfaction scores, your subscribers, etc. But you'll also see your actual costing. And underneath here, you'll also see a breakdown to a high level: infrastructure, software, labor, and other. If you want more detail and you look at that on a ServiceNow platform and you say, well, I'm not sure I really understand the cost of that labor spend, drill into that through the Apptio application. So going back into the Apptio platform, and then you've got your complete financial drill running from the application all the way down to show you the details to support it. So ultimately, the summary that we believe this is bringing to our customers is we will increase delivery velocity. We expect to see in excess of 25, 30+% reductions in the connection and the bringing in of that data and the allocation strategies involved because it's consumptive based. So for those of you in the past that have been through those workshops where you sit there thinking, how will I allocate my towers to applications? What percentages will I use? What drivers will I use? How will I have those discussions to get agreement on it? All of those disappear because there is no discussion. We know exactly what assets, what IP assets are connecting to what applications. So that's why that velocity goes up quite significantly. We believe this will give you much better decisioning because it combines the financial view and the operational view into one. We believe it gives you a much greater alignment to the out of the box because we're taking away the need for you to have to work out those connectors. It'll make sure that it future-proofs you as Apptio does its upgrades and ServiceNow does its upgrades. Using these next generation connectors will always stay in sync with those out of the box products. Obviously, the improved data quality, as we've talked about, increasing that accuracy, the integrity of the towers drives the integrity all the way through the model, leading to that TCO accuracy. And that's really what everyone that we talk to in the Apptio community, ultimately what they really want to get to is accurate application TCO. If I've got accurate application TCO, I can have accurate services TCO, and then I can start bringing in business data, I can start doing unit rate assessments. But it all really depends on the accuracy of that total cost of ownership at your application. And when you build that accuracy, it's the trust from the IT side into the business customers that we see will improve. For the simple reason being that your end users will have the ability to look at the data on the ServiceNow side, and they can see those trace maps that we showed earlier. They can see the integrity of the CMDB. They can look at the Apptio model side, and they can do the drill on the financial numbers, and they can see the drill and the tieback in the model to the financials in the general ledger. So when you drive integrity to a general ledger and an auto-populated CMDB, that's what we see is really generating that trust in the IT numbers and that trust going forward with your business users. In terms of timing, as I mentioned earlier, the ingress connectors will be available over the course of the coming weeks and months, and we'll provide more details on that as they release. They are in early approval at the moment. General release, I would expect somewhere within the next 4 to 6 weeks. The egress connectors are probably going to take until March to April timeframe before we're ready to release those. But we will be releasing in 2 tranches. We'll be focusing on the ingress first of all, and then we'll be releasing the egress connectors as a secondary. Once these connectors are built, we've already had requests from many customers to get other data out of ServiceNow. And we'll be looking and working with ServiceNow for other data sets that we can look to bring across as part of this next generation. So throughout the course of 2021, you will see more and more and tighter integration between the ServiceNow and the Apptio data sets in a bi-directional view as we move forward. If you would like more details or a deeper presentation on this, please reach out to your CSM or your customer success advisor or your account manager. We can do a detailed 1-hour presentation, which is targeted to your IT executives, CIO, CTO, CFO type audience. So please reach out if you'd like to organize something of a more detailed view. And with that, I'm going to close out for any questions and discussions. Thank you.
Okay, Pete, we do have one question in the chat. Will these connectors be available in Data Link Classic?
No, these are being built in our new Data Link. They require a new generation of technology that the new Data Link connectors are building, so they will not be a classic view.
Yep, and if anyone needs to gain access to the new Data Link for these connectors, you can work with your customer success team and they can help you get that access. Okay, please feel free, post your questions in the chat, come off mute. We'll give it a minute or two so everyone has time to open up the floor.
Hi, Pete. I have a question.
Yes.
And it may be off topic. My name is TJ. I'm with Cox Automotive. I was just wondering, for the upgraded portion, you may not be able to answer this right now, but is there some development that needs to be done for each upgrade? Because I know we may go through like 2 a year, and I wasn't sure if that's something that we have to reach out to our CSM to make sure we're on the same page, or, you know, with this, would it be automatic?
So the connectors will be available automatically. They will be part of, so once they are released, whatever that version may be, version X for the sake of this conversation, once you've upgraded to version X, then the connectors are there and ready to use. Obviously, there will be some configuration required to set up the connector, but that's pretty straightforward. Probably the most amount of work for a customer to think about is there will obviously be the unwiring of your allocation strategies and the rewiring, because we want to move that assumptive logic out and replace it with the consumptive logic. We will be preparing some field service kits to help customers understand the best way to do that. But yes, obviously you will need to address your allocation rules, undo what you've got there to the degree that you do, and then rewire with some of the new data that's coming in. The good news there is that you don't have to unwind everything. So if you've got enhanced server data, for example, or enhanced storage data only, and you want to do them, step by step, then the connectors will allow you to choose which data sets you want to bring in. So you may want to do it as a piecemeal, section by section, or asset class by asset class, or you can go ahead and do it in one go. It's really up to you at the time, and we can help guide you through that conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.
Okay, a few more questions in the chat. Will this connector function roughly the same way as the existing data link connectors, i.e., can they be scheduled, put data into TBM Studio as a data link service account, etc.?
Yes, so the new data link connector with the new date and time scheduling capabilities will all apply. So all of the common functionality that exists in our new data link platform will apply to these connectors.
Okay, and then what is the level of effort involved from the ServiceNow side to support and deploy these connectors? And are there any ServiceNow licensing and contract issues they should address before getting into this process?
So I'm not a ServiceNow expert, but I can certainly give you the view. So if you do not have the auto discovery licensing, then obviously that will be a conversation that you would need to have. I understand from my many conversations with ServiceNow customers that there are many situations where the licensing is actually sitting there and it's just being unused, depending on the license structure that you have. So the first thing to do is, if you are wanting the auto discovery capability, is to check with your ServiceNow account manager on your auto discovery licensing. I will note that there are other ways to auto discover. So for example, there are other tools in the marketplace that auto discover data into ServiceNow. So just because you're not using a ServiceNow auto discovery doesn't preclude you from using these integrators at all. And I know some customers use a combination of ServiceNow and other auto discovery tools. So that would be the first conversation to have with your ServiceNow team. I can't comment on licensing for the population into ServiceNow. I haven't heard of any requirements for that, but you might want to double check. There are no licensing requirements on the Apptio side. If you have a CT license, then you have access to these connectors. And then obviously the work effort to set up the connectors to bring data into Apptio. There's no effort that I understand required on the ServiceNow side because we are connecting to their REST-based APIs. Once you've got the data into Apptio, we've talked about you may need to unwire and rewire some of your allocations. And then there will be a standard egress connector that will populate data back into ServiceNow. I don't have the final technical details on that. We're still working our way through that. But at this stage, the data will be populated back into ServiceNow on an automated basis, so there's nothing to do there. What you then do with that data in ServiceNow and how you then use that data, that's a conversation, again, that you would then need to have with your ServiceNow team. Does that help that question? I know there were a few parts to it.
No, I think you covered it. Thank you. And then we have one more question before we wrap up. And if we don't get to anything, if there's more questions in the chat, we'll be sure to follow up with you individually. But the last question from Jim is it the case that the connectors are both initiated by Apptio?
Yes. So both the ingress and the egress sit on the Apptio data link side of the platforms.
Great. And so Jim, as long as you have the data link financials module installed in your environment, once that ServiceNow capability comes into the system, you'll be able to initiate those connectors, but it will sit within the Apptio data link product.
And it obviously goes without saying, you can do ingress only if you wish. You don't have to do egress back.
Okay, perfect. All right, so if you have any other questions, please follow up with your CSM, your CSA, and then as the course of time goes on, you'll see more and more information about this on Apptio community as well.
Thank you everyone for your time. This is an exciting new chapter for us on the ServiceNow Apptio relationship, and we're looking forward to bringing that next level of data quality to many of our clients as we move forward.
Yep. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.